good evening last night? Yeah, sounds like it. You know, this is just a fantastic area. I grew up in this area. You'll tell throughout the presentation that I'm from Boston because I drop R's. So just be aware of that as I'm speaking. But I was talking to my coworker, Cindy, and you know, we mentioned that this whole area has just changed and been revitalized compared to when I was growing up, and you basically didn't want to come down to this area when I was growing up. But you know, it's a good example again of transformation that we're seeing. We're seeing transformation in the city of Boston. We're seeing transformation, you know, in a number of different industries. And what I'm going to talk about this morning is the transformation of the manufacturing industry, what we're seeing within that industry, which is the market, the PTC primary services. And during this session, I'm going to share with you some examples of how we can leverage the smart products that are transforming manufacturing to provide smarter services, to increase customer value, and also increase the service revenue and profitability opportunities of manufacturers. So there are three topics I'm going to talk about this morning. I'm quickly going to start out and tell you about PTC. Just briefly, I think many companies that are represented here today actually use our products, but you may not be aware of it because they're being used in other areas of your business. I'm going to talk about the transformation and the paradigm shift that we're seeing across multiple manufacturing industries today as it relates to smart products. And then finally show you some examples of how we can leverage those smart products to change the way in which we provide service and provide much smarter services to customers to increase their value. So starting off, what about PTC? We're a software company and a service company, and we essentially provide technology solutions that enable primarily the manufacturing industries, but other industries as well, to transform the way in which they create and, more importantly, innovate their products, and then service those products throughout the life of their products. So the companies can move from a model of being focused on product sales and revenue to a model of capturing as much revenue as possible throughout the entire life of that product while providing their customers the maximum amount of value. We're actually better recognized for our product brands many times than we are for the company brand. You know, people look and say, who's PTC? And you know, a lot of times I'll start off by saying, well, the company originated with a product known as Pro Engineer, and they go, oh, you're the Pro Engineer guys. It was a tool which actually revolutionized the way in which 3D design was done. But we have a number of different product lines now that are used throughout manufacturing companies, from the engineering organizations to the manufacturing organizations to service organizations. You know, especially today I'm going to be talking about the service organization environment, and many of you may be using Servigistics products, which is part of the PTC family. We also have a product known as Integrity, which is one of the leading solutions for managing embedded software development. So many of the companies here today are probably using the Integrity product. So we're in your company. It's just that we're in different areas of the company than most people are familiar with, especially when we talk about service. Now, we have a large number of customers, as you saw on that last screen. We have over 27,000 manufacturers who use our software today. And what we see, and what the analysts see as well, is that there's a paradigm shift occurring within the manufacturing industries. You know, it's essentially a shift from the way they used to represent their company to the value they offer their customers now, where they've moved from offering standalone products to the idea of integrating together a set of ideas, number one, into a set of new products and new services which change the way in which they interact with their customers, and they share information with their customers, and they work with their customers throughout the life of the product. Some examples of that, you know, we'll go back 10 or 15 years. So this paradigm shift is something that's been occurring over a period of time that we're all familiar with, I think, but it's really started to accelerate recently. And, you know, I think one of the first examples we saw that most people are probably familiar with is what happened in the aircraft engine industry. Okay, if we look at the aircraft engine industry, you know, it's hard to believe that a product as complex as an aircraft engine could actually be considered a commodity. But it got to that point in the 80s, where essentially the aircraft manufacturers were giving the engines to the airframe manufacturers and to the airlines just to get the service revenue from those engines, because it was very difficult to differentiate the engines. Until one of the engine manufacturers changed the model. They said, well, we're not going to sell you the engine. We're going to sell you the value of the engine, which is thrust or power by the hour. And now that entire industry has moved to that model. All the engine manufacturers, for the most part, all new engine sales are done on a performance, power by the hour basis versus the actual sale of the product any longer. You know, we see that happening in other industries as well. For example, HVAC. You know, same problem. I mean, it's very difficult to differentiate yourself on a product alone. So we've seen they've moved from the idea of selling HVAC equipment to selling comfort, the value of their products versus the physical features of their products. We're seeing it across industries such as electronic components as well, where they're moving away from selling electrical equipment to selling energy efficiency. We're actually seeing it all the way down to components within products. And I heard someone talk about this yesterday, the idea of actually monitoring bearings. Okay? So the idea that, I'm not going to sell you a bearing any longer. I'm going to sell you the guarantee that it rotates or the shaft rotates. And if there's a problem, I'll make sure it's resolved before that actually stops rotating. So that's the performance base. One additional example here is we see that they're actually moving beyond just focusing on the value to their customers to focusing on the value of their customers' customers. So one agricultural equipment company now talks about the fact that they're helping feed the world. They're helping farmers maximize the yield from their farms so that they can better feed the world. Okay, so a lot of paradigm shift occurring here. And what this does is it's really changed what the definition of the product is. So the product in the past was really a set of standalone, best-in-class type products like tractors, attachments, combines, and the customer could actually pick and choose from which manufacturer they wanted to buy different products from. And the main competitive advantage for the agricultural industry was brand recognition, and I think we're all pretty much aware of that. If you look, farmers are typically very loyal to a brand, but they can actually switch brands very easily based on a bad experience. So the agricultural industry was looking for new ways to essentially get closer to their customers and guarantee that relationship throughout the life of their products. So we started to see the transition. Let me just go back a second and talk about the fact that back in those days too, which wasn't too long ago, we're talking 15, 20 years ago, those products were primarily mechanical in nature. There was, some electrical components and some software on those products as well, but mainly for safety purposes. That's all. The only reason they're putting software on the machines at that point was really from a safety standpoint. But we've seen the transition where that combine now is loaded with sensors, something you've been talking about here for the last day, the idea of collecting sensor information. But those sensors aren't just collecting information about the product. Those sensors are collecting information about the crop yields. It's actually monitoring what's actually being harvested from the fields and feeding that back to a database, which is now giving the farmer the visibility into how well his farmland is producing different products or different crops. That same information is then used by the farmer and fed into his tractor, so the next time he goes to plant a crop, the machinery will automatically determine what the optimal level of seed and fertilizer is based on the last yield that came out of the field, which is really great. It actually helps to both optimize the crops for the farmer, maximize their profitability, and actually maximize the yield and improve the environment as well. We're actually using less fertilizer as a result of this on the crops these days. Those products can also be hooked into other information systems, such as weather forecasting. Okay, so now we're actually helping the farmer determine and optimize the maintenance of their crops, again, to maximize that yield. And then finally, it can be hooked into other sources as well, such as the commodities market. Let the farmer know exactly when he should be selling his products, when he should harvest those products, and then what he should be planting as his next crop within that environment. So this is the model that the agricultural industry has moved towards. The idea that we're no longer selling those standalone products, we're selling a suite of products that solve a specific need for the end customer, being the farmer, and their customer, which is feeding the world. As a result, we've seen there's been a dramatic shift in the makeup of a product. Okay? A product, still has a lot of mechanical components. Actually, has about the same number of mechanical components, but it's a much smaller percentage of the overall product makeup. We've seen a dramatic increase in the level of electronics and especially the software that's going into products today. And that's what makes the product smart. That's what gives us the opportunity to offer new capabilities in new types of service to the end customer. So although the manufacturers have done a really great job in creating this vision and creating value for their end customers from a product standpoint, they've lagged somewhat behind on the service side. So what we see in many of these environments is service in some cases actually holding back how successful and how valuable these products can be. And that what's happened is, the service organization has sort of reacted to smart products. They're in a position where they look at these smart products and they say, wow, you know what? I can't train everyone on every aspect of these products. I need to change the model. We can't do pre-training any longer. We need to do on-demand learning instead. There's just too much going on. These products are evolving too quickly. So that model has to change. Today, they're in a complete reactionary mode. I was out visiting a couple customers last week, and both had the same problem. They said, I have to send multiple technicians to the same customer to fix their products. They don't know each other's there many times. And the customer's asking me the question, why are you sending 2 people, and why don't they know what each other's doing? So it's a major problem in most manufacturers' service organizations is how they're actually going to manage the fulfillment of service for smart products, which leads us to the next point here, which is the products have become much more complex to diagnose and service. So, they need new ways. They're saying those old service manuals just don't cut any longer. In fact, the volume of information they're creating is increasing, which is decreasing, again, the efficiency of the technicians in the field. So service is actually taking a hit, and the reputation of the products is taking a hit. And finally, since they want to move to this model of on-demand learning, they need to somehow capture that, because they're saying we're no longer going to be able to sit there and train everyone up front. We need to learn from experience and as things go on. So I need a way of actually capturing what's going on in the field, yet today I don't have the tools to do that. And that's really where smart products come into the picture, where what we're talking about, the examples I'm going to show you today, are a transition. It says instead of reacting to smart products, from a service standpoint, let's be proactive. And in some cases, it's going to require cooperation with the engineering organization to do this. But there's great opportunities to provide smart service with smart products when it's thought out and it's done in a proactive fashion. First, a lot of what I've heard about in the last day is the idea of preemptive service discovery. Let's avoid failures. We have a lot of technology there to connect to that product, a number of different ways that we can help, identify when service is necessary, whether I have to dispatch a technician or whether I can fix it remotely. Let's optimize fulfillment. I occasionally do have to send someone out to work on the product in the field. Let's make sure that they can get that product up and running as quickly as possible so that we minimize the customer's downtime and we maximize the service efficiency and the profitability of the service organization. And finally, let's do it in a way that allows us to collect information from the product and combine it with what we're learning from the people who are actually servicing those products for continual product and service improvement. So I'm going to show you a few examples here. Instead of going through a bunch of PowerPoint, let's look at 3 specific examples. And let's start with the idea of preemptive service discovery. And this is a situation where a lot of the technologies that I'm going to show you today exist within your companies. They're just not connected. So we're going to start in a very logical place for this audience, which is we're going to look at a remote monitoring environment. And the fact that we have a service representative who's going to be monitoring a fleet of products out there in the field, and they're going to see that one machine is flagging as red, meaning we're getting an alert off that machine. And the question becomes now, what do we do? What we want to do is we want to be able to provide that service representative with all the information and knowledge they need to narrow down what that exact alert means and make the decision whether I can fix it remotely or whether I got to send a service technician out there. So what we'll do is we'll link in that remote monitoring environment with a set of remote services that help the technician understand that asset or that product that's involved and link that in with the history of that product as well as the maintenance schedule for that product to help the service representative, again, understand everything that that product really needs to make it healthy and optimize its performance. We'll then look at the fact that, the service representative may want to dig down and learn a little more about this error or this trigger or alert that's occurred. When does it occur? What is the exact situation? So allow them to connect with that product and actually remotely operate that product to determine and understand the context in which the error occurs. And then finally, link it in with the interactive diagnostics so we can actually identify what the problem is. So let's go ahead and look at a video demonstration here. Where again, we're starting out where we have our fleet map up on the wall, we have our service representative, and we see that there's one red machine out there that I can go ahead and select. And what that does again is it takes me right into an environment where the service representative is looking at information about the product, the different services I can offer remotely, what the needs of that product are, both current and upcoming. So here's a link between my remote monitoring where I'm pulling information off the machine and I'm linking it in with the maintenance schedules for that machine to make recommendations on what service should be done. In this case, the representative wants to actually drill down and look at this specific error. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to link up with this machine. Now, in real life, this is a demonstration. We'd have to have a bunch of safety conditions in place here. But the idea being, we can connect with that machine and actually give them a set of information to help them diagnose the problem, where we can give them a representation of that machine, again, graphically, as to what's going on, and they can operate the joystick remotely, and they can see the pressure readouts and see exactly when that error occurs. They can click on that error, and it takes them right into the diagnostic mode, where it says, well, we know what that error is coming off the machine, but it's very generic. It's just an error code. It says there could be 37 potential issues associated with that error code.